Well, I'll tell you what, I'm not real sure what's going on, but on the off chance that I'm actually recording, Lord, I love technology, except when it doesn't work the way I'd like it to. Okay, this is Dr. Terry James Gingrass, and I'm going to be out of town on Sunday, which is when I normally video, but I'm trying to record something a little early and then post it tomorrow. I'll be traveling across country to a conference to learn a little bit about high performance coaching, which I hope to bring back and use with a lot of my ADHD families. Okay, I've had some nice responses to the new website. I'm real pleased with it, and thank those of you who've bothered to look at it, and especially those of you who've signed up for my newsletter. That should be coming very shortly, but right now, well, life is real busy. So today I wanted to talk about managing again. We had a little break in there where I talked a little bit about fathers' roles in the ADHD family. Now I want to go back to the whole strategic parenting thing, and we talk about managing, because one of the real big differences between being the parent of a neurotypical child and the parent of an ADHD child is that there are a lot of things in their lives that you have to manage that you wouldn't necessarily have to for a neurotypical kid. I mean, ADHD kids are well known for having difficulties with time management, working memory, and organization. Okay, the time management, pretty much everybody knows what that is, but the interesting thing about ADHD kids is that they don't have a good time sense. They don't have the idea of my brushing my teeth takes 10 minutes, that kind of feel for things. They constantly underestimate how much time things are going to take. A school project, they'll think they can do it in a half hour the night before, and they just don't have a real appreciation for the passage of time, and how for most of us, time is one of those things that we sense, that we feel, that we can recognize the passage of time. And most of us know when we've been doing something for an hour, or know when something is going to take us 2 or 3 hours to get it done. It's just one of those things we don't even think about, and nobody trained us to it. We just have an innate sense of the passage of time. ADHDers just don't seem to. The other thing is, the other big area is what's called working memory. Okay, now working memory is a type of memory. I really understand, memory is way more complicated than just like you've got this digital recorder in your head. It's not like that at all. Memory has at least 4 main components, and more in some theories. And new memories change old memories. It's one of those reasons that, like, probably the least reliable information judicially is eyewitness testimony. 6 people saw a robbery committed or were involved in an accident, and you'll get 6 different stories about what happened when and that sort of thing. I remember once as a kid, my parents were in a car accident. It's one of these chain reaction things. And so they had to go to court, and they took us with them, mostly because the court was quite a ways away from where we lived. And they figured, we'd go, and it was actually in Boston, and we'd go and then stay in town and then go out to eat, anyway, we'd make it a family thing. But I was listening to this testimony, and I could not believe it. I mean, there were people saying the road was straight. There were people saying the road was curved. There were people saying there was ice on the road. There were people saying the the road top was completely bare. There were people saying it was raining. There were people saying it was snowing. There were people saying the sun was shining. I couldn't believe that they were all talking about the same event. But anyway, working memory is when you don't want to remember it forever, but you want to keep it in awareness until you get the job done. It's like, when you were a kid and your parents told you to, do 3 things: go up to your room, pick up your socks off the floor, make your bed, and brush your teeth. And for most of us, that's not a big deal. ADHD kids have a horrible time with that, and they will typically do maybe one of those things, maybe not any of them, but probably no more than one of them, and then you find them up there playing video games or something, and thinking everything's fine, not exactly understanding why you're so angry, if you are so angry. If you are angry, you need to work on that, because obviously your expectations aren't terribly realistic for an ADHD kid. You are going to be in a position all the time where you're going to ask them to do a couple of things and they're not going to get them done. And you have to understand that that's all right. And that you are just going to have to accept that and basically try to reinforce them for what they do get done. And hopefully as they get older, well, first of all, as their brains mature, as they get older, they do slightly better. But the other thing is that they hopefully learn how to compensate for that. And that's the management part for you as the parent of an ADHD child, is you've got to teach your kid how to compensate for all the things that he or she has difficulties with because they were born with ADHD. Okay, so one interesting way to look at it is that they have what is an interest-based attention system, which means they can pay attention great to what they're interested in. They have a horrible time paying attention to stuff they're not interested in. No, that isn't the way most of us work. Most of us have a couple of ways. Yeah, we're interested. If we're interested in something, it's easy for us to stay interested and get the thing done. But for other people, but in other circumstances, we'll get it done because people expect us to do it, because we'll get into trouble if we don't do it, because we can see past the immediate and think in the long run, doing this lets me do something else that I like better, sort of thing. Why go to college? Well, I don't like it. Didn't like, especially the first 2 years when you're taking all required courses, but then you get to take some stuff you really enjoy. But you do that and you do the work because you know the long-term gain is worth the short-term discomfort. ADHDers don't work like that. If they're not interested in it, they have the devil's own time paying attention to it. It's just the way they are wired. Okay, so that really applies also when we're talking organization. Okay, ADHDers have a different way of looking at organization. They do it differently. A lot of ADHDers are more visual, and they organize things visually. Okay, for most of us, and in most school systems, you were taught linear, logical ways of being organized. You write down what needs to be done. You break it down into smaller and smaller steps. You da-da-da-da-da. Well, ADHDers don't necessarily do things that way. They like, organization-wise, if you have got a bunch of stuff, they tend to be more visual lateral organizers. That is, any flat surface will have a pile of stuff on it, and that's the way they stay organized. Personally, I'm one of those people. I alphabetize it, put it in a file folder, put it in a file cabinet. That works for me. but I know many people that I'm related to who don't do it that way. They have to have piles of stuff. And any flat surface in their home is like they have a pile of stuff on it. And while it may look like just a jumble to you, they know where stuff is and they know how to find it. So that's their organization style, and that's the way they do stuff. If you have an ADHD child, you're going to have to pay attention. How do they organize things? Does it seem like they have to be able to see everything? If they do, then your way of managing it is probably going to have to be to get a bunch of clear containers so that all the science papers are in one clear container and all the arithmetic papers are in another clear container, or so on and so forth. That helps them because they can still see that the stuff is there. And they won't just kind of forget about it like they tend to do if they try to use somebody else's organizational system. And I don't know about in your all area, but in my area, they have taken to trying to teach kids how to be organized, but they do it in a very logical, linear, left brain kind of way of, doing outlines and smaller steps and smaller steps and smaller steps. And if you can handle that, if you can do that, then great, more power to you. But odds are your ADHD child's going to have trouble doing that. And so that big organization book that they give them is going to end up being empty, or have 3 words written in it for the whole year. And that's expected, actually. I mean, that's not unusual at all. So, when you're thinking about ADHD kids, you got to be thinking about how they manage time, how to get them organized, and how to compensate for working memory problems. Okay? Now, there are lots of different ways, and you're going to have to be creative. Because I tell you what, I learned more from my ADHD child than I did from the other 2 together. He took me places I never had been, and some of them I didn't want to go to, but I learned a lot. I learned a tremendous amount. You have to remember, ADHD kids are generally brighter than average. You heard me. They're brighter than average, okay? They are compulsive, outside-the-box thinkers. They come up with solutions to problems you never even thought of. They combine different elements together to make a solution. And it's great, but it's unusual. And you should cultivate that because it's really important for us as a culture, because increasingly the old tried and true solutions to the world's problems aren't working very well. And so somebody's got to come along with some new stuff and hopefully give us a chance. And my guess is it's going to be an ADHDer who does that. Remember, entrepreneurs are the hope of the current economic system in the United States anyway. And more than 50% of all entrepreneurs have ADHD. Think about that. Entrepreneur, an original thinker who's got the courage to take an idea and try to make a business out of it. 50% of them have ADHD. Wow. Think about what that means. Think about in the future what that'll mean. These are going to be the people that are going to change the world. And you got to kind of think about that. You've got to believe that, because I'll tell you, the hardest part about being an ADHD parent is having reasonable expectations. And part of the thing, there's always in the back of your head this little dialogue where you're thinking, oh my God, he's going to end up in jail, he's going to end up, on a street corner, he's going to end up da-da-da, or she's going to end up, and whipty-dipty, all these catastrophic things that can happen. But it doesn't have to be that way, okay? Doesn't have to be that way. And most of the time, it does not end up that way, okay? But you are vitally important. You got to manage the problems they do have, except that the problems they do have are as a result of the way their brain is wired, and it's not because they're behavior problems or oppositional defiant or conduct disorders or any of those other things. It's because of the way they see the world, the way their brain is organized. So that's going to be the biggest adjustment for a parent of an ADHD child to make, is that things will work out. You just have to keep plugging along. You have to have reasonable expectations. You have to try to train them in some things that maybe you didn't have to train your other children in, if you have any. Or maybe you were never trained in it yourself. So, but they're going to need some, some training about time management, some training about working memory, and some training about organization. Okay, and they're going to need the training. You're going to need to be flexible in the training and understand that there's not just one way of being organized, and there's not just one way of managing time, and there's not just one way of compensating for working memory problems. The good news, the easiest one probably is the time management thing. Lord, now we have all this technology, and we have all these things that have timers on them. And using a timer will set you up to, set your child up so he doesn't have to count on his own perception of time. He can wait until the buzzer goes off or whatever. And there are a lot of different techniques that are being used to, say, get them through their homework. I don't know if any of you have you ever heard of the Pomodoro method? I'm told that Pomodoro means tomato in Italian. And the reason it's called tomato is because they used one of these kitchen timers that looks like a tomato. And but the idea is you say, okay, we're going to work on homework for 20 minutes. And you set the timer for 20 minutes. And when the buzzer goes off or the alarm goes off, they get a 5-minute break. And then you come back and you set another 20 minutes. And for some reason, breaking it down like that makes it easier for them to get started and actually make some progress. It sounds like a really simple thing, but it really works. And there are lots of other methods that we'll talk about more in the future, but that can be really helpful in getting your child just some compensatory strategies so he or she can deal with ADHD better. Okay, well, that's probably more time than I've planned on spending this afternoon, but I'm Dr. Terry James Gingras. My website is terrygingrasphd.com, and my book is ADHD Strategic Parenting, available on Amazon. And buy the book, leave me a review, sign up for the newsletter, let me know what you think of what you're hearing, and especially if there are some things you'd like to hear that I haven't covered yet. Okay, like I say, I've been doing this for over 30 years, working primarily with ADHD families, and in addition to having raised an ADHD child. So I've been through the mill and still here, and we're really looking forward to providing you some valuable information and some help. Okay, thank you. We'll see you next week.